Yay.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's session, Working with the Blur and Media Composer. We're very happy to have with us James Biddle today. He's one of our master instructors, and he's done several presentations so far. So we'll quickly go through the housekeeping items. As most of you know, the webinar is being recorded. Your audio is muted. Feel free to raise your hand if you're having an issue, and I'll come to you separately to try to fix whatever that issue may be. We are also trying to monitor the social feed, so feel free to enter your questions in the question field of Zoom or in the social feeds. Go ahead and try it. Tell us where you're calling or where you're watching us from. We'll be happy to give you a quick little shout out. The recorded sessions will be posted back to avid.com on the webinar page, so you can go ahead and take a look at them there. So let's see, we've got people coming in from the UK. We got people from Argentina. Awesome, welcome. Also somebody in from India, so great to see you guys on the feed. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and quickly introduce James Biddle, again, one of our Avid master instructors, and he's also a college instructor. So with all that, James, I'm gonna quickly hand this over to you because I know we have a lot to cover today in this session.
Okay, everybody. Hi, how you doing? Welcome to beautiful Athens, Georgia, in my house, in my room of stuff. So yes, today we're going to address the idea of blur. Some people have asked questions about this, whether you want to blur out a logo or you need to blur out someone's face, and how you do that in Avid, and maybe how you can do that a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit slow. I've actually prepped some sequences today, and what I'll let Dawn know is that when I'm done, if you have any specific questions, you can go ahead and email me, and maybe I can answer your questions online, or do a quick video for you. I don't mind doing that at all. So what we're addressing today is the idea of a blur. Okay, and for a blur, we need to know certain things. I'm going to switch over to camera 2. And what you need to know is, if you've never done this before, this is called an intra-frame effect. Avid refers to this as an intra-frame effect. Some of the most common ones are blur, mosaic, and paint. Today, I'm actually going to be using paint. One of the key elements of an intra-frame effect is that you need a shape. You must have a shape. If you don't have a shape, you can't really use an intra-frame effect. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we are going to get started. All right. Okay. So we hired this terrible actor up here to portray someone who we need to blur out their face. Why? Maybe they didn't sign the waiver, or maybe you're with a news team and you need to blur out somebody's face for safety reasons or something like that. So what do we do? In the effect palette, okay, I'm going to come over to the effect palette, and we're going to take a look at some filters here, which are great. In the image category, okay, oh, my effect palette is being really cagey right now. There we go. We have a few effects that are intra-frame, that are pre-built. We have a blur effect, we have a mosaic effect, and we have this thing called a paint effect. Let me start with a blur effect first. All I'm going to do with the blur effect is drag it right on top of the video. Boom. And there it is. And I have placed the blur effect. And this is what troubles most people. It's like they say, I can't see it. And it's like, yep, that's because this is an intra-frame and we must have a shape. So our shape tools are on the side. So we can draw a rectangle. We can draw an oval. And that's usually exactly what we want. Now, the interesting part of this is, if you're used to using Avid effects, there are no keyframe graphs. On an intra-frame effect, there are no keyframe graphs. If you look, and maybe what I'll do is I'll switch this to a single monitor to make it a little happier. Nope, it's being My system's being a little crazy right now. It's because of my dual monitor setup. It has nothing to do with Media Composer. You will notice that on an intraframe effect, it immediately puts in a keyframe at the beginning and a keyframe at the end, because we do all of our keyframing in this window, right? Technically, what is known as the record window, we would be using it here. So the first thing I do is I just draw an oval. I'll click on the oval tool and I draw it. And it's like, hooray, it's done. I have a blur. Well, notice, if you can see, it's got a nice hard edge on it. One of the things you really want to do with a blur is give it a feather. So I can come over to the blur effect tool, go to feathering, and it's like there are no controls. Right. You can draw multiple blurs, multiple masks in one intraframe effect. That's why it's different than other effects. So I need to go back and highlight that. Okay, I've highlighted it. And then I will take the feathering bias up and I will increase the horizontal. Actually, I'll take the horizontal back, take the vertical. And what we want is a nice deep, yeah, there it is. And we want to take that edge off of it. Okay, usually you can tell somebody who really hasn't done a great job with a blur because they haven't feathered it at all. Okay, they just have not feathered it. Okay, and we get a nice feather blur. It's like, yay, it's all done. Then when I go through, it's like, oh, it's not moving. Oh no, oh no. Not only that, if you will notice, at one point, the phone goes through it. And that just, it just doesn't look good. This is why when I do blurs, and when I recommend to people doing blurs, let's now do this. I'm going to remove this blur effect. And what I actually want to do is I want to use a paint effect instead. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to find the paint effect. Okay, it has a little paintbrush on it. Drop it on. Boom. Go back to this view. And notice it has a mode. And one way I like to do it is I actually start with a solid in the mode view. I'm like, what? Okay. So what I will do is I'm going to go back to the very beginning. And this is, it's the same as with other effects. If I move in the timeline, it takes me out of the effect. So I've got to remember to move in what is now the effect monitor, which was the record monitor. Take my oval, drag it, and it's a big red blob. Okay, it's a big red solid, and it's easier for me to see. It's easier for me to position. Not only that, notice in the paint effect, I get more controls. I could do a poly or I could do a curve tool, and I can get far more defined shapes without having to use the reshape tool if you are familiar with this. So you're like, that's great. That's a solid. It's like, yep. And I could feather that, and I could get a better idea of what the feathering is going to look like when I feather it based on the solid. And then all I have to do is switch the mode to, see, outline. Oh, look, there's blur. Boop. Now there's the blur. The reason why I've done this is in many cases, if I do a blur effect, people will say, hey, can you change that to something else? Could it not be a blur? And I'll say, sure. How about a mosaic? And they'll say, ooh, yeah, we want that kind of look, that sort of stylized, weird 80s checkerboard craziness. It's like, yeah, that's fine. I can totally do that. And, change the mosaic up, change the mosaic down, make it look even stranger. Yeah, that's fine. And then they'll say, no, I hate that. Go back to the blur. And I can go back to the blur if I use the paint tool. So it gives me a few more controls and all of this. Why else do I want to use this tool? Okay, I'm going to move that up and really just blur it out. Why else do I want to do that? Because when I came through here, first of all, I'm going to have to move this. Okay, I'm going to have to move this, which means I'm going to have to use tracking. Now, I've already set up a tracker, so you don't have to see me go through the tracking process. The other thing is the phone goes in front of it. How would I remove that phone? What most people will do is they'll try and do something like the title trick. Okay. They would do something where they make the arms into a separate, they'll do the option drag up, do like a garbage mask around it. You don't have to do that if you use the paint effect. And let me show you. Okay. So I'm going to load another sequence called paint. Now I've done this one in paint. And if I come here, what I can show you is on this mask, there is tracking. Okay. I did some tracking. If I go into the tracking tool, what I did, oh, I got to make it bigger. Come on. There we go. Boom. If I go into the tracking tool, what I did was I tracked the sides of my glasses. And I did 2 points. I did 2 points because what I needed to do is I actually move forward in the frame, and I need 2 so it will resize the mask. This was actually really quick to do because I had a nice mask contrast point. Okay. Now, as I move the phone up, watch what happens. You can see the phone. How does that work? Well, what I did, if I click on here, there is another mask. And this mask is known as an erase. What an erase will do is it basically erases other masks like blurs or solids or mosaics. So when this moves, okay, it's just a small one, it covers up or erases the blur. Let me see if I can just go in here real quick. Let me do a Command L and Option G. And this is what happens. It literally just, the mask itself does this. Why would we do this? Well, maybe you have somebody going in front of logos. I've seen TV shows where, they have to mask out logos and their head disappears behind it. If you just use this little mask, and yes, there are 2 masks in the same effect. There are 2 masks in the same paint effect. And that way you can get this nice, and it doesn't take very long at all. And you can track it or you can keyframe it down here to get rid of it. And this literally took me no time at all. Like if somebody had said, hey, we need this and we want the phone to go in front of it, fine. This took me about 4 minutes. This took me about 4 minutes to do. And I set this up so it would not be easy. It was going to be, one of these things where it's like, this is not going to be fun, because if we watch it, I move my head. Okay. I move it up and down. And then the phone goes in front of it eventually, right about where those keyframes are. Okay. Phone goes in front of it, behind it. And then, just to be silly, I doodle my head around a little bit. And then I decide I need to do my little dance, move my head up and down, do this, do that. And with 2 tracking points on my eyeglasses, it was able to move. It was able to move. Now, if my hand had moved slower through this and had gone across my face, I'd probably need to do another mask. But this is what I recommend when you do a blur, is to use the paint effect. Okay. All right. We have a question for the erase mask. Did you do it manually or did you track it? You can track it or you can do it manually. Either way. I did it manually because the motion was just, all I needed was just that little bit right in there. I did track the mask over the face, but in this case, it was just, all I need is really a few keyframes. And you will notice it completely goes off the edge there. Okay, it completely goes off the edge. And it's like, it doesn't really matter. It's not affecting anything else. So yeah, I just did it manually in this case. If it was more elaborate, then yes, I would have added tracking points to the corners of the phone. I would have added tracking points to the corners of the phone, tracked it, and then done it that way. But otherwise, this was just so simple. I'm just like, I'll just come through here. And every time I hit a frame, I'll drop a keyframe, or every time I move it, it's going to drop a keyframe in here. That is the major difference. One thing I do want to address very quickly that people ask me about, and then I'll be happy to answer some more questions, is they will say, hey, Do I use a blur when I want to do that cool thing where it's like, I really want it to have like bokeh or that, that defocused background? Believe it or not, no. Blur is basically used as a blur. I've created a sequence called blur sequence defocus, and you will notice there is a quote unquote blur behind me. Okay, there is a blur behind me, but it is not actually a blur, and it is not actually an intraframe effect. In this case, in 3D warp, there is something called defocus. This has keyframe graphs and all of that. And yes, you can do what's called an internal or a foreground only. I don't want to get into too much about this, but this is how you would do like a defocus to give that like depth of field thing there. And then you would have to use an animat, or what is known as an animated matte, which is another form of intraframe effect to sort of cut me out from that defocus in the background. The defocus is meant to look more like a lens defocus, where the blur is meant to be used as basically a corrective tool to blur things out. Okay, so one is an intraframe effect. The defocus is in 3D warp. So if you're looking to blur faces, blur logos, anything like that, you would want to use the blur effect, which is a form of paint effect, or use the paint effect. Again, I like the paint effect because I can quickly do these little erases right here and make that happen. Okay, any questions that anybody has at this point that I can answer? I'm going to go ahead and just stop sharing so you can see my beautiful, beautiful face. If not, just let me know, because that's all I've got for blur. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, I'm
James,
drinking
we did
mate.
have a question.
Yes.
We had a question come in. If the person isn't wearing glasses, is it best to try to track on the eyes, the ears, the face? Where would you track without glasses?
That is a great question. So in this case, let's go back to the one where where is it? First one, boom. And what I will do is I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that mask. So if I wasn't wearing glasses, and let me just jump in real quick, this is where it takes some experimentation. And I'm sure the person asking me understands what tracking is. I tend to talk like, I deal with a lot of students, so I have to talk in sort of primary terms. So I don't mean to be insulting when I talk about this. Usually when you are tracking, what you're trying to do is just get the best. You need to basically try and match the camera movement or the subject movement as much as possible. You will probably need to reposition things. What you need is an area of high contrast and an area of clear pixels, and basically, something that matches the movement as much as possible. In this case, I might, looking here, up the nose would be a pretty good one because we have an area of high contrast. That would be if I'm only moving side to side. Because if I move forward or backward, that's not going to get enough to make a change between 2 points. So I would either go with inside of the ear, or possibly, if my beard was darker, somewhere on the beard, or maybe the edge of my hair, and just try it. And I'm one of those people, I would do 1 point at a time to make sure I get the best one that I can. It's the key thing about tracking is it's kind of hit or miss. The more you do it, the more you get used to certain ways to do it, and you notice certain things that are better. Okay, if it was minimal movement, I might use my mustache. Okay, so you just have to kind of judge it, and it may take a couple of times, and then you get close to the movement, and then you may have to reposition anyway. Yeah. What else?
All right. The next question is, if you are doing this for people in a crowd, what would you recommend?
That's a tough one. what I would recommend first is taking a still of who's in it and who needs to be masked, mapping it out first. Like literally putting little dots on people and saying, okay, this one, this one, this one, this one. Because if you lose track of that, that's a big problem. And then you can decide who's going to get mapped over whom. And yes, this is the case of an intraframe effect that you may have. And let me just go back to the screen real quick. Let me go back to number 3, where yes, I have two masks in here. I have the 2 that deal with what is going on. Why are you there? Oh, okay. I need to Command L back, Command K back. I have 2 in here. You are not limited to 2. You could have dozens, maybe more of masks in there. And the best thing to do is map it out ahead of time as to where you're actually going to need the masks and then place them in. Okay. Richard has a question. It'd be helpful to put a temporary color effect on the clip to increase the contrast. Yes, Richard, you're absolutely right in that because if we go deep, I didn't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but Richard made a question where it made a statement where it's like, yes, you can put a temporary color correction on things. Sometimes you get better contrast, you can track it, and then you can pull the color correction. That is absolutely correct. And Richard, thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. Okay. What else?
Is there a limit to the amount? Is there a limit to the number of blurs you can have in a frame?
I honestly do not know the answer to that question if there are a number of masks. What I would do is, maybe do one paint effect on there, map that out, then do another one and map that out. It's all a matter of just keeping track of what section. You could break the frame down by quadrants if there are a lot of people and say, okay, these are the masks that need to be in this quadrant, this quadrant, this quadrant. It all depends on how you want to organize it out and make it happen, especially with crowds. I've heard some horror stories where people have to blur out faces or other parts of the body for places like PBS, and they're dealing with crowds of hundreds, and they send it to PBS and PBS checks and they go, nope, you got something showing here. You need to blur that too. And everybody I've talked about that says we've started, whenever we do it, we break everything down into quadrants as to what's going to get blurred here, what's going to get blurred there, so we can keep track of it. And they may actually have, if you have assistants, if you're lucky enough to have assistants, each assistant may have a quadrant, or you only tackle one quadrant this day, this quadrant this day, this quadrant this day, this quadrant this day. If you're dealing with a news situation and a fast turnaround, you may just need to make a quick sort of, I do a quick export, put it to the side, draw all things over and say, okay, here, it's good enough. We're off. It all depends on the amount of time. I'm open to more questions.
Awesome. Thank you for the great answers. Let's see if we have any more questions popping in here. You're getting some nice thumbs up on the social feeds. So that's good. Let's see what else we're getting in here.
Well, I wish I could get everybody here thumbs up because your comments have been great. Yeah. So everybody gets a thumbs up.
It looks like that's always a good thing. It looks like that may be the end of our question. We'll give everybody just a quick second while I pop up our next session screen.
Great.
So feel free to still ask your questions if you have them. As we know, we got Media Composer, how to fix or fake handheld footage. That's with Brian next week, August 4th. And then August 6th is music and the movies, a taste of music editing. So again, feel free to pop up a question really quick before we sign off if you have it for James, or you can reach me at liveonlinelearning@avid.com, and I can always get your questions over to James. So James, it looks like you got everything covered. Thank you again for such a wonderful session. I love your presentations. I'm so happy to have you with the sessions.
Couldn't do it without you, Dawn.
We'll let
Could
everyone
not do it without you.
Oh, thanks. So we'll let everyone get on with their day, afternoon, or morning, depending on where you were watching us from. So thank you all. Have a good one. Bye.